I don't think I love you no more. You never seem to call me lately.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Cronin and welcome to a brand new Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program. Now this is again quite an old game. I think it came out in about 2015, but last month they released the new 1.9 version, which was called No Place Like Home. Now I've not played this game for a long time, so there's been an awful lot of updates which I've changed a few things which I'm not aware of at this point. So I figured with Kerbal Space Program 2 being announced, now is a good time to get back into the swing of things and try and relearn all the stuff I've completely forgotten about Kerbal Space Program. So we'll be starting a brand new game here, and let's just name it after the channel, why not? I'm going to go for a career mode. I'm a big fan of old Kerbodyne, so let's have Kerbodyne's flag. I'm going to be kind of not rushing through, but kind of going through a lot of the basics because I want to get to the good stuff as fast as possible. So we'll be trying to get some signs gathered, get ourselves our first couple of ships built, get into space, do our orbit of the moon, land on the moon, and then kind of go from there. So first things first, for anybody that's new to Kerbal Space Program, there's a bunch of excellent tutorial videos out there. The tutorials that they put into the game since it launched are really good as well. So I'll talk through like a few of the various simple basics of the game, but most of it will just be marching on with getting into space essentially. So most of the stuff we'll be doing from here, the space center. So the first things first is we'll go straight into mission control and we'll pick up some basic missions. Now most of the development in the game is based on science. The more science points you accrue from doing science experiments, the more stuff you can unlock. So we'll pop it here very quickly. We'll look at the research and development. So this is like the skill tree almost, you can imagine. So you start off with first few things you can unlock are like basic rocketry, which gives you some better engines, some fuel tanks, solid rocket boosters. You can then go down the engineering line, which gives you decouplers, some science stuff, some antenna. Survivability gives us some more cool stuff like heat shields, more science stuff. As you head down this line here, this will give you more science stuff to do, and the kind of rule of thumb here is that the more science that you conduct, the easier it is to generate the science points that you need to unlock all these. So but you can't do that without some sort of progression into the rocketry. You start unlocking really big engines, big fuel tanks, big fuel boosters, and so on and so forth. You can also get for your larger ships like the gantries that hold the rockets in place on the launch pad. You can go down the aviation line for if you want to start building like aircraft as opposed to rockets, and so on and so forth. But we'll come to it. We'll gradually unlock these things as we go along. So first things first is we'll pick up a couple of missions which will give us some extra science and extra money as well, starting with like 25,000 Kerbal bucks. So let's see what we've got. So the first one is to recover or transmit any science experiment data from Kerbodyne. So essentially anywhere we are, we do any science experiment, we get that. So we're definitely going to pick that up. Now we've got skip the atmosphere. We're not quite ready for that yet. And orbit Kerbodyne and launch our first vessel. So we're going to pick this one up as well. We can take a maximum of 2 contracts at a time at the moment to start off with, but we'll very quickly start to open that up so we can collect more missions at a time. Okay, so we've got our actives. We can see our active missions here, and archives just shows the missions that we've done, whether we passed them or failed them. So we'll get back out in here, and the first thing we'll do is we'll go to our assembly building and start building our first craft, basically. So in here is basically where we'll be building all our vertical craft, I would class it. You can go over to the other facility, and this would be where you create your I'd say horizontal craft. It's probably not the correct terminology for it, but essentially airplanes go here and rockets go here. So first and foremost, one of the main things we're going to need is a command pod for our Kerbals to sit in and pilot. So this will be the first thing. Now what we're going to do first of all is something a little bit different. We've got in our science section, we've got a mystery goo containment unit, and this is basically a very simple science experiment that observes floating goo, and you can essentially run experiments on it in various different atmospheres and scenarios, and it will give you different results. All of these things generate science. So what we'll do is we'll pick up one of these and we'll attach it to the ship. Now what I want to do is we'll want to run this a couple of times. So we'll come down here to our symmetry count and we'll put 2 on. So we can put 2, 3 on, 4 on, and it'll basically put them on in a nice symmetrical way. So we'll just make this 2 for the time being. We'll stick these on the side there. Okay, so the next thing we need is we will put we'll see what engines we've got available to start with. So no fuel tanks, but we do have solid rocket booster, command and control. Yeah, so essentially none of these things are really going to help us a great deal initially. So what we'll do is we'll put on, if I can find the damn thing, is a parachute, and basically this will allow us to float back down to Earth quite safely with our Kerbal inside. And since we've only got one engine that we can put on, let's shove that on as well. Now this is what was this again? This was a solid fuel booster, which means that we light it and we've got literally no control after that. So yeah, take our lives in our hands essentially. So we'll check our crew. Now we'll put good old Kerbodyne in the pilot seat to start with. Now essentially the staging, the way that this staging is set up is that when you hit the space bar it goes through the various different stages. Now what we want to do is in here, this is set in one stage, so basically the solid fuel booster would fire and the parachute at the same time. We don't want that, that would be bad. So rather than setting our Kerbal off into space with a vast plume of smoke and fire and wailing and gnashing of teeth, what we'll do is we'll set the staging up correctly. So we add another one, we put our first stage, basically counts down, so if you've got like 10 stages it will go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2 and so on. So on our first hit of the space bar it'll fire the solid rocket booster, second one it'll fire the parachute to get us back down to Earth, or Kerbodyne. Now the little buttons down here, got our messages here. This will show our missions that we're looking to do. Now we should be able to achieve both of these in one shot, because we've essentially just got to gather some scientific data and then launch our first vessel. Here we get a breakdown of what we've got on the ship itself. So we're using 5 of 30 parts, we're 2.5 tons out of 18, These are like the maximums that we can use at this point until we start upgrading various facilities, and then the size and height and all the rest of it. We'll come back to these at a later state, but essentially this is all we really need to start our first couple of missions. So what we'll do is we'll just now these craft will all save as soon as you go to the launch pad anyway, so what we'll do is we'll just give this a name, so let's call it Jeb 1, and we'll head to the launch pad. Now once we're on the launch pad, we can kind of get a good look around our ship. We can see a little Jeb in the pilot seat there. Now the first couple of things that we're going to do is we're going to run some experiments to sort out our first mission. So we just right click on the goo container and observe the mystery goo, and we're stationary, just says it doesn't seem to be doing much, but that's generated us some science. Okay, now we can, if we had an antenna attached, we could transmit this science back to base, but obviously as you can see you get much less science for doing that. What we want to do is recover the data and then we'll drop it off once the craft gets recovered back to base. So keep that experiment. Now this can't be used again. We can reset it and run the experiment again, but we'll lose the science that we've already picked up on it. So we'll leave that one as is. The other thing we can do is we can do a crew report. Now basically wherever the command pod is, we can generate a crew report for that situation. Now within the game everything is like in a biome almost, so we're currently in the launch pad biome at the moment. So if I do a crew report here, it'll say crew report from the launch pad. If I did it over here on the runway, it would say crew report from the runway, but that would be different science to what we've collected on the launch pad. So we'll collect this from the launch pad now. So that's two parts of science that we've already done, and the last one that we can do is we can send a little Jeb outside the craft and do an EVA, or I think it's an extravehicular something action. So we do that and he pops out. We get the option of either letting go, which will make him jump down to the ground, or he can climb on board. Now you can go up and down the ladder using your W and S keys. So what we can do is we can right click on Jeb and do an EVA report, and he'll describe what he sees around him. Now obviously because he's on the ground, he's absolutely right. Space probably wasn't necessary. So we'll keep that experiment and press B to get him back inside. So that's pretty much all the science that we can really achieve from down here. As you can see, we've got to get some science from Kerbodyne. I'm not quite sure why that hasn't. That possibly only completes once we actually hand the experiment in. So we can definitely get this one going right now. So again, as I said, we press the space bar and it will automatically fire off the solid rocket booster. Next time we press the space bar, it will launch the parachute. So we press Z to make sure we've got maximum thrust. Not that we've got any control over an SRB, but let's go on our inaugural flight and see where we end up, and hopefully we don't die in a big ball of flame. So here we go, 3, 2, 1, go. Now as we're going up here, we can ask Jeb to try and keep a handle on the stability. So the stability system here, Jeb will basically try and keep it pointing in the right direction. So you can see our speed going up is starting to drop because we've run out of fuel now. So what we'll do is while we're up in the air, so we'll just observe our mystery goo again. And it says it's jiggling around, so we'll get some good science for that. So what will happen now is eventually the rate of ascent will slow and we'll start dropping back down to the ground, and we will continue dropping to the ground very, very fast. So what we want to do is to ensure that we don't go slamming into the ground. We'll pop our parachute probably when we hit around about 3,000 meters, and this is above sea level. You can see if we change this, that's above land, so that's what's directly below us, or sea level. So we're about 3,000 above sea level because we're almost at sea level down here. As soon as we get to there, we'll launch our parachute with the space bar and hopefully come floating nicely back down the ground. So when this is white, you can basically launch this parachute at any time, but the longer it's out, the longer it takes to get back down. So I usually wait until about 3,000, pop it there, and it'll open up in its first sort of small iteration. When it gets to about 1,000, it'll open out fully, and we're going to hit the ground too fast. Maybe not. There we go. So yeah, this should be a pretty good landing. And there we go. We landed safely. Everything's in one piece. Fantastic. That went really, really well. So what we can do is, if we, just a little trick to get a little bit more science here, is we can do another EVA little jab here. Now what we can actually do here is we can take the data that we've already gathered, so this includes our crew report from the launch pad, and then we can store these all back inside. Now that puts them back in a different place, so we can actually go back in and do another crew report, and that would be a separate experiment because we're not on the launch pad anymore. So what we'll do is we'll just board. We'll take another crew report, and as you can see, we get extra science crew report from Kerbodyne Shores. So keep hold of that. Good job, Jeb. And then come back up here, recover the vessel, and this will basically give us all our science that we've accrued, and hopefully complete our missions. So got the crew reports, EVA reports, the goo, and then recovery of the vessel. So our total for that is 20.4. Sorry, we got 30 science in total. Let's go next on there. We've, for all the parts that recovered, we've generated 2,683 from the funds that we spent. So I'm not quite sure exactly how much we spent, but I think the only thing that we couldn't get the money back on was the solid fuel, because obviously that we've spent that, so we don't get anything back for that. So next, and good old Jeb survived, so he gets some XP, and we get some reputation as well. So this is our reputation bar. When we explode lots of things and fail missions, we end up losing reputation down here. When we do good stuff, we get more reputation. Now, reputation is largely unimportant at this point, so we'll finish that. We'll just check on the status of our missions. So that's been done as well. So we check our messages. So we've got some milestones that we generated. Get rid of that. We launched our first vessel. So we got a completion reward for that. We gathered our scientific data, and we got a reward for that as well. So that's excellent stuff. That's a great start. So we'll go back over to mission control, and we'll see that we'll have a load of new missions that we can take as well. Now, the focused observational surveys are all basically to take a crew report at a certain area. Now these are actually, even though they're only 1 star, they're actually quite difficult to complete, because you've got to be, as you can see, in flight below 18,000 meters at a certain point. Now most of these are on Kerbodyne somewhere, so we're going to just ignore those entirely. We've got one to test a solid fuel booster. Now it's the hammer, which I don't think we've unlocked yet, We've got a flea, which is another SRB. We've got a small decoupler which we can test. We've got one to escape the atmosphere, which is basically up to 70,000 meters. We might be able to do that one. This one, the swivel liquid fuel engine, activated through the staging sequence. So yeah, we activate it on Kerbodyne, and we're heading with like an escape trajectory. So we'll probably take this one. Test the Mark 16 parachute. So we need to be between 12 and 15. So we'll be opening it quite early. But again, this is probably one that we can knock off in our next flight. So let's take that. So we'll go over to our R&D department, and we've got 30 science to spend. So we'll get our basic rocketry, which will give us the swivel fuel engine that we need to test. It also gives us a hammer solid fuel booster, which we can also pick up a mission for, and a very small fuel tank. So we'll take that. We'll also take the engineering, because that gives us a decoupler, another bit of science that we can do, and we can largely ignore the antennas because we won't be using them at the moment. So we've got 20 science left. So we've got the option of some heat shields, another piece of science that we can pick up, radiator panels for exuding, getting rid of heat, landing struts, radial mount chutes, which can be useful, the service bay, protecting instruments, RTS, yeah. So we can kind of ignore that at the moment, but this one would be good to get because of the extra science that we can do. And again, the more science that you do, the more science points you get. We've also got stability. We could pick up some fins for stability in the air, a nose cone, which are handy for putting on top of SRBs to make them more aerodynamic, radial decouplers, which are essential for solid rocket boosters. And then up here we've got the Reliant liquid fuel engine, bigger SRBs, bigger fuel tanks. So I think for the sake of science, because it will help us unlock these, we'll pick up this one here, because this will give us the barometer. So that'll be 2 extra pieces of science that we can actually conduct. Okay, so let's take a look at our next objectives here. So we've got to, now we can click on these to sort of pin them on the screen, makes it a bit easier. So we've got, I'm not quite sure why this is still showing here. We've actually completed that. So we've got to test the swivel fuel engine on Kerbodyne and in an escape trajectory. So basically this will be our main engine that we're going to use to get the rocket off the ground. So that's okay, we can achieve both of those. And then the Mark 16 parachute, as long as we deploy it between 12 and 15,000 meters, then we'll complete that as well. So that's a Mark 16. So we'll go back into our building design. Now we'll be able to essentially largely reuse most of this in our next build as well. So first thing we'll do is we'll get rid of the solid rocket fuel booster. We've got our parachute already on there. So take a look at the engines. Now the swivel fuel engine, if I right click on that, it gives us some more information. Now this one has a gimbal as well, which means that it can tilt and it can be used to steer the craft as well. These are hugely helpful, especially early on for keeping the craft pointing where you want it. Now the other things to bear in mind here are the thrust at sea level, which is 167 kilonewtons, and thrust in a vacuum. Now certain engines are better in Kerbin's atmosphere, some of them operate better in vacuum, so out in space. So we will be keep paying attention to these numbers when we're fitting certain parts. Now we'll come down here and we'll just take a look at the stats on the craft as it is. Now one of the key things in rocket design is how much power do you need to move how much mass through the air and get it into orbit and so on and so forth. So that's where this little tab here comes in quite handy. So our mass at the moment is only a ton. Now generally speaking, the rule of thumb which I've kind of used for a long time is multiply that by 10 and that should give you what kilonewtons it would take to lift it. So for example, in this case, 10 kilonewtons would be enough to get this off the ground. Now if we fit this engine, we've got 167, which means that we can put a load of fuel tanks on it and we can essentially move through the air for a longer period of time. So apologies if I'm not explaining this particularly well, but I'm trying my best. So the first thing we'll do is, because this is what's going to be coming back down to Earth, we will just find the correct thing here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll put heat shield on it. Now that one's obviously way too small, so that heat shield there. So basically when we're coming back down from whatever height, if we're passing through the atmosphere, then it's going to generate heat, so this will help protect the pod and everything inside it. So we'll definitely need that. Now because this is the last thing that we'll be having coming back down to Kerbin, we'll need a coupler so that anything below it can be essentially ejected off, so that the pod is what's left. So I'll put our decoupler there, and then the next part is actually how do we get up there in the first place. So we'll have a look at our fuel tanks. So we've only got the T100 fuel tanks, so what we can do is we can put a bunch of these on here. Let's go with 4 for now. Yeah, we don't. We only have to get up to like 15,000 meters, so I think 4 will be absolutely plenty. And then finally, our engine. We want to test this engine, so let's put that on the bottom there. Okay, so that's our basic craft. Now, one thing that we want to make sure of is we get some science on here as well. So we're going to our science. We've already got 2 mystery goos, so we can keep them on there and use them again. We could probably put 2. I'll probably move this around a little bit. Let's move them up a bit further. I could probably put 2 barometers on there. So that'd be 1 on each side like that. Now we'll take our thermometers. I'll just put these in a line here, like so. So hopefully, if we get enough time to actually click on these things while we're hurtling through the atmosphere, we'll get a bunch of science in the different areas as we're travelling up. So, and finally, I think if we have the ability, yeah, we can put some fins on it to just stabilise it as we go up. So these, I tend to go with 3 is usually a good number, because then whatever direction the air hits them at, you're going to have something that's keeping the craft stable. Okay, so we'll check our staging. So first things first, our main engine fires and uses all the fuel in all these 4 tanks. Once they've run out, we hit the decoupler and it ejects everything from there down, and then finally our last stage is hitting the parachute so that we can get safely back. So we'll call this Jeb 2 because reasons, and we'll head to the launch pad. So because this is going to be a fuel engine, what we must make sure is that we set our throttle all the way up to the max. Otherwise we'll hit the launch button and we'll just sit there. Unlike a solid rocket fuel booster, with shift and control we've got the ability to raise or lower our throttle. So on this flight, the only thing we've really got to remember is that we need to hit an altitude of 12 to 15,000, and that's where we want to deploy the chute. Now, we've got to be a bit careful with the speed. As long as this is white and not red, we can safely deploy the chute. If we do it while it's red, the chute will just get torn off because we're travelling too fast, so just got to keep that in mind. So, with that said, let's launch and hopefully get back down safely. So, here we go. So what we'll do is we'll just turn on the stability control again, so a little jab in here, we'll try and keep it pointing in the right direction. Now the little nav ball down here, as you can see, we've got like G-force up that side, we've got our throttle up this side, got our heading, got our speed, and obviously the SAS toggle there. So now we're up into this part of the atmosphere here, and our engine's just popped. What we'll do is we'll just stage and get rid of that, and that'll just fall back down to Earth. So while we're up here, we're gonna jump into this part of the atmosphere here. So we'll just run our experiments there, so that's a good bit of science. And we'll also do a barometer while we're here as well, and a thermometer. So do the bottom one first. So that's a good chunk of science there, and we'll also do our crew report from here as well. Okay, so that's a good bunch of science. So what we want to do is wait until we start coming back down again. Now there's probably going to be enough pace in the craft as it come back down that it'll start generating quite a bit of heat. So we did the right thing by putting the heat shield on. So I'm just, don't think we actually completed this one, so we may need to do an actual full flight with a proper trajectory to do that. So we'll, yeah. So what we'll do is let's see if we can get him out for an EVA. It's probably a bit dangerous, but no. So as you can see, cannot disembark while off Kerbal surface because we need to upgrade the astronaut complex. So we can do that at some point. But basically that'll allow Jeb to hop out whilst in space, almost, you could say. At the moment we're just in the upper atmosphere. On this part here, you could essentially think of this as like the air density, I suppose. So this is the normal surface density. You then get into the sort of the area, I guess, where planes would fly. You've then got the upper atmosphere, and then you head out into space in the black bit. So in all of these different areas, if you run experiments in these different areas, you're going to get different results with the same thing. So as we're coming back down, it's our experiments on this side and the top one that we want to take. So as I said, we just got to bear in mind that we need to, hopefully the parachute will handle this side for us, but all we need to do is to make sure that we hit the staging when it gets to 12 to 15. So we're starting to come down. So there's 15, so we'll hit the staging there. That's just on the edge of what it's capable of doing. And we'll do some pressure data there and the goo as we're floating down as well. Good stuff. So the speed was a little bit on the high side. I'm hoping that this is actually going to complete this mission. coming down, speed's coming down as well, so again once it hits 1,000 this should open up fully, and then that'll slow us right down. We need to get between 40 to 100. So there we go, opened up fully now. So there's our 40 to 100. And we should get a safe landing out of this. And once again, we're going to be, I think, in a different biome yet again. So unlike the sort of the grass plains here, so we should be able to do another EVA and another crew report for some more science while we're over here as well. So we've done all these. You can tell you've done them because it says review data. The goo containers are open, so we can't use them again. I think we used, oh, we didn't actually do that one, did we? Yeah, so they've both been done as well. And we've done our crew report because it's only given us the option to overwrite. So now that we've landed safely, let's pop Jeb out, and we'll take the data out of the craft. And if we do an EVA report, so yeah, so we're on Kerbal shores. We've got some science for that, so that's good. And we'll store our experiments. Press B to hop back inside, and then do another crew report from here. So we've already done a crew report from Kerbal shores, obviously, so we could ignore that. So that's that mission done. We can recover the vessel and see what science we've generated. So we've got a good 59 science out of that, which is excellent. Jump into here, we can see all the parts that we've managed to salvage from the mission as well. No XP gain for Jeb, but you know, experience is experience. We've got some reputation, so that's cool. Now looking at this, strangely it seems that our contracts didn't complete. Not exactly sure why that is. The engine one, we probably need to be actually in a trajectory, not just going straight up and down as we did. So we can do that on the next flight. The Mark 16 parachute, I've got to wonder whether we need to be, we couldn't possibly be at that altitude and that speed at the same time, so again I'm not really sure why that didn't complete. If you do know, stick it in the comments down below, but we will give it another try and see if we can actually get those to complete. So so that's a few missions to get started with at this point. That'll do it for this episode. We'll come back in the next one and we'll do some of the more, we'll try and get these two missions finished for a start, and then yeah, then we'll continue on some higher end missions. We'll spend some of this science and get some better equipment to work with, and then see where we go from there. So thanks for joining us, guys. Don't forget, if you like the video, smash the like button, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.